Standing in Gerald's living room on Mother's Day, I watched the photographer arrange everyone for the family photo. My daughter Ashley turned to me and said, "Can you step aside, Mom? I want my real mother in this picture." She positioned herself next to Diane, her stepmother, smiling as if I had never existed. Every eye in that room locked onto me, waiting for tears, for rage, for collapse. I smoothed my hair and smiled. "Funny," I said quietly. "Even ghosts know when to leave the frame." Then I walked out. But I wasn't done. The next morning, I woke in my small apartment with Ashley's words still echoing in my head. Real mother. As if 22 years of scraped knees, midnight fevers, school plays, and heartbreaks meant nothing. As if I had not been the one who held her through her first breakup, who taught her to ride a bike, who sat up all night when she had pneumonia at age 7. I made coffee with shaking hands and sat at my kitchen table, staring at the cream-colored walls of this place I had called home for the past 8 years. 8 years since Gerald left me for Diane, his dental hygienist. 8 years of watching my daughter slowly drift away, spending more weekends at their big house with the pool and the 3-car garage. 8 years of pretending it did not hurt when Ashley started calling Diane for advice instead of me. The divorce had been brutal. Gerald fought me on every dollar, every asset, every piece of furniture. He painted me as difficult, unreasonable, impossible to live with. His lawyer was expensive and ruthless. Mine was a family friend named Barbara, who did her best, but was out of her depth. In the end, I got the smaller share. Gerald kept the retirement accounts. I got enough to put a deposit on this apartment and survive while I rebuilt my life. I worked as a guidance counselor at Hamilton Ridge High School, a job I had held for 18 years. It paid decently but not extravagantly. I drove a 10-year-old sedan. I clipped coupons. I had learned to live small, but I had always believed that Ashley and I would be okay, that our bond was stronger than money, stronger than Diane's manipulation. Yesterday proved me wrong. I stood and walked to my bedroom closet, pulling down a box from the top shelf. Inside were treasures I had saved for years. Photographs of Ashley as a baby, her tiny hand wrapped around my finger. Birthday cards she had made me in elementary school, covered in glitter and crayon hearts. A baby blanket I had knitted when I was pregnant, soft yellow yarn that had taken me 3 months to complete. Her first drawing, a stick figure family with Mom written in wobbly letters. Movie ticket stubs from our mother-daughter outings. Programs from every school play she had ever been in, her name highlighted in yellow marker. I spread these items across my bed and felt something shift inside me. Ashley needed to remember. She needed to see what we had been before Diane rewrote our history. I spent 3 hours carefully packing everything into a box. I wrapped each item in tissue paper. I wrote a letter, 3 pages long, pouring out my heart. I told her about the day she was born, how I had counted her fingers and toes, how I had promised to protect her forever. I reminded her of specific moments. The time we got lost driving to the beach and sang songs for 2 hours until we found our way. The time she fell off the monkey bars and I carried her 6 blocks to the emergency room. The time she was terrified to start middle school, and I walked her to her classroom, holding her hand the whole way. I sealed the box and paid for overnight shipping to her apartment near State University. It cost $42, money I could not really afford, but I did not care. This would work. This would remind her who I was. I felt hopeful for the first time in months. 2 days later, my phone started buzzing during my lunch break at school. Text messages, notifications, alerts. I opened Instagram and felt the blood drain from my face. Ashley had posted photographs of every single item from the box. The baby blanket was captioned, "When your bio mom tries to guilt trip you with old photos, LOL." The birthday cards were arranged in a grid with the caption, "Desperate much?" My 3-page letter was photographed page by page, certain sentences highlighted and mocked. She actually thinks I remembered this stuff. I scrolled through the comments, each one a knife. Ashley's friends chimed in with laughing emojis and supportive messages. "You deserve better. She sounds toxic. Good for you for setting boundaries." But what made my stomach turn were the comments from people I knew, neighbors, church acquaintances, even a few parents from Hamilton Ridge. I had no idea Megan was like this. Wow, manipulation much? My heart goes out to that poor girl. And then I saw Diane's comments on every single post. Stay strong, sweetie. You don't need this negativity. Real mothers don't use guilt. I'm here for you always. The posts had been shared. Hundreds of people had seen them. My private pain, my desperate attempt to reach my daughter, had become public entertainment. My phone rang. Gerald. I answered, my voice barely a whisper. Hello. Leave Ashley alone, he said without preamble. You're making this worse. She doesn't want your guilt trips or your manipulation. Move on, Megan. He hung up before I could respond. I sat in my office at school, surrounded by college brochures and motivational posters about believing in yourself, and I cried. Not quiet tears, but ugly, choking sobs that I muffled with my hands so no one would hear. My attempt to reconnect had backfired spectacularly. I was not just rejected, I was humiliated, publicly branded as manipulative and pathetic. I tried calling Ashley. The call went straight to voicemail. I tried texting. No response. That evening, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, watching car headlights sweep across the walls. I had lost the battle for my daughter's heart, and worse, I had lost it in front of everyone I knew. 1 week crawled by. At school, colleagues who had once been friendly now kept their distance. Some had clearly seen the social media posts. Others had heard about them through the small-town gossip network. Principal Thompson, a man who had always been professional if not warm, called me into his office on Thursday afternoon. Megan, he said, folding his hands on his desk. We need to talk. My chest tightened. About what? I've received some complaints from parents. 3 families, to be specific. They're concerned about you counseling their children given the situation with your own daughter. I felt heat rise to my face. My personal life has nothing to do with my professional abilities. He sighed. I agree, but perception matters. One of the parents is on the school board. I'm going to need to place you on administrative leave while we investigate. Investigate what? I haven't done anything wrong. I understand this is difficult, but it's policy. You'll be on leave with pay for now. We'll review the situation and make a determination. I wanted to scream, to flip his desk, to demand justice. Instead, I nodded and walked out with as much dignity as I could gather. I cleaned out my office that afternoon while students whispered and pointed. By 3:30, I was carrying a cardboard box of my belongings to my car, escorted by the vice principal as if I were a criminal. I drove home in a daze. My career, my identity, my purpose was being stripped away because of social media posts. But I still believed the worst was behind me. I was wrong. The next morning, a certified letter arrived. I signed for it, my hands already trembling before I even opened the envelope. Inside was a legal complaint. Gerald and Diane were suing me for defamation and harassment. The lawsuit claimed I had made false and malicious statements about Diane, damaged her reputation, and caused her emotional distress. They were seeking $50,000 in damages. Attached to the complaint was an audio file transcript. I read it with growing horror. It was a conversation between me and Ashley. A conversation I remembered having 2 days after the social media incident. I had driven to Ashley's apartment, desperate to talk to her face to face. She had reluctantly let me in. We had argued. I had said things I regretted, things said in anger and pain. Diane has manipulated you. Your father chose her over our family. I sacrificed everything for you, and this is how you repay me. But in the transcript, my words were isolated, taken out of context. Ashley's provocations, her cruel statements, were completely absent. I sounded unhinged, irrational, accusatory. Ashley had recorded me without my knowledge, and she had given the recording to Gerald and Diane. The lawsuit also included a request for a restraining order prohibiting me from contacting Ashley. I called Barbara immediately. She came to my apartment that evening, reviewed the documents, and delivered the devastating news. This recording is bad, Megan. Even if it's edited, even if we can prove Ashley provoked you, you still said these things. Fighting this will cost you $15,000 to $20,000 in legal fees, and there's no guarantee you'll win. What about the restraining order? If you fight it and lose, it goes on your permanent record. It makes you look worse. My advice is to accept a limited restraining order. It shows you're willing to give Ashley space, that you're not the obsessive person they're painting you as. So I just let them legally separate me from my own daughter? Barbara's expression was sympathetic but firm. You pick your battles, Megan. This one will destroy you financially, and you might still lose. I felt trapped, cornered. I signed the agreement 3 days later. The restraining order stated that I could not contact Ashley unless she initiated contact first. I could not call, text, email, or visit her. I could not send gifts or letters. If I violated the order, I could be arrested. My daughter was legally off limits to me, but the humiliation did not stop there. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned that Diane was telling people she was afraid of me. She claimed I had shown up at their house unannounced, that I had sent threatening messages, that I was unstable and potentially dangerous. None of it was true, but Diane was playing the victim beautifully. She was reasonable, concerned, protective. I was the unhinged ex-wife who could not let go. I sat alone in my apartment the night after signing the restraining order, staring at the legal papers spread across my coffee table. I had been systematically destroyed. My relationship with my daughter was severed. My career was in jeopardy. My reputation was ruined. And I was legally prohibited from defending myself. Diane had won. 2 weeks passed in a fog. I barely ate. I stopped answering my phone unless it was Barbara calling with updates. The school investigation was ongoing, which meant I was still on paid leave. But the silence from Principal Thompson was ominous. Then came the call I had been dreading. Megan, this is David Thompson. The school board met last night. We've decided that it would be best for everyone if we part ways. We're offering you a resignation in lieu of termination. You'll receive 3 months severance pay. I felt numb. So I'm fired. We prefer to call it a mutual separation. It protects both parties. If you refuse, we'll have to terminate you, and that goes on your record. This way, you resigned for personal reasons. I had no leverage. I signed the resignation paperwork the next day. My severance check, after taxes, was just over $15,000. It was now all the money I had in the world besides my dwindling savings of about $23,000. I allowed myself one day to grieve the loss of my career. Then I started applying for jobs, guidance counselor positions in neighboring districts, administrative roles, anything that matched my qualifications. But references were required, and Hamilton Ridge High School's references were lukewarm at best. I can confirm Megan worked here from 2007 to 2025. She resigned for personal reasons. No interviews came. I was sitting at my kitchen table on a Wednesday evening, scrolling through job postings, when another certified letter arrived. My hands shook as I opened it. It was from a law firm I did not recognize, Sterling and Hathaway, attorneys at law. The letterhead was expensive, embossed. This was not Barbara's small general practice. This was a firm that charged $500 an hour. The letter stated that during our divorce settlement 8 years ago, I had agreed to pay Gerald $12,000 to equalize asset distribution. According to their records, this debt had never been paid. They were now seeking immediate payment of $12,000 plus 8 years of interest at 6%, totaling $17,500. If I did not pay within 30 days, they would freeze my bank accounts and garnish my future wages. I ran to my file cabinet, yanking out the drawer so hard it nearly fell. I found my divorce settlement papers and read through them frantically. According to my copies, all debts were settled. Both parties agreed that all financial obligations had been met. I owed Gerald nothing, but when I compared my documents to the ones Sterling and Hathaway had attached to their letter, the numbers were different. Their version showed an outstanding debt of $12,000 that I had agreed to pay within 2 years of the divorce. The signature at the bottom looked like mine, but I had never signed this document. It was a forgery. I called Barbara immediately. She came over the next morning, examined both sets of papers, and shook her head. These are sophisticated forgeries, Megan, proving it will require forensic document analysis, expert witnesses, court battles. You're looking at $30,000 in legal fees, maybe more. And even then, there's no guarantee. I can't afford $30,000. I barely have that much left in savings. Then you might have to settle. Pay a portion of what they're claiming to make this go away. But it's fraud. Gerald is lying. I know. But proving it will bankrupt you. I felt the walls closing in again. Every avenue was blocked. Every move I made to defend myself cost money I did not have. That night, as I lay in bed unable to sleep, I heard a noise outside. I got up and looked out the window. My car was gone. I ran outside in my pajamas. The parking space was empty. I called the police. An officer arrived and took a report. Ma'am, if your car was repossessed, you should have received notices. I haven't received anything. Check your mail carefully. Sometimes they get misplaced. But I had checked my mail religiously. There had been no notices. The next morning, I called my car insurance company to report the theft. The representative put me on hold, then came back with confusion in her voice. Ma'am, your policy was canceled 2 weeks ago. You called and requested cancellation. We sent the refund check to the address you provided. I never called you. Well, someone claiming to be you did. Let me pull up the notes. Yes. On the 15th, a woman called, verified your social security number and date of birth, and requested cancellation with a refund sent to a P.O. box in Riverside. That wasn't me. That's fraud. You'll need to file a police report and contact our fraud department. But right now, you have no active insurance. I hung up and stared at the wall. Diane and Gerald were attacking me from every angle simultaneously. Financially, legally, professionally, personally. They were dismantling my life piece by piece, and I had no way to fight back. I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by legal papers, bills, and notices, and I realized I was losing everything. My job was gone. My savings were being drained by legal fees. My car was gone. My insurance was fraudulently canceled. My daughter was legally forbidden from me. I had never felt so powerless in my entire life. 3 weeks into this nightmare, I was drowning. I had spent over $8,000 on legal fees between Barbara and a criminal lawyer I had consulted about the insurance fraud. The car repossession turned out to be legitimate. I had missed 3 payments because I had been so consumed with everything else. My credit score plummeted. I was depressed, losing weight, not sleeping. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the hollow-eyed woman staring back at me. I needed help. I needed someone to believe me. I called my younger sister, Laura. She lived 2 hours away in Lancaster, married with 3 kids. We had always been close, talking on the phone every week, visiting for holidays. Laura had been my rock during the divorce. I told her everything. The Mother's Day photo, the package backfiring, the restraining order, the job loss, the financial attacks, the insurance fraud. Laura listened, but her responses were brief. I see. That's difficult. When I finished, there was a long pause. Megan, maybe we should talk in person. Can you come to Lancaster this weekend? Something in her tone made my stomach clench. Of course. Is everything okay? We just need to talk. I'll call you back with details. I also reached out to Carol, my best friend of 27 years. We had met when our kids were in preschool together. We had coffee every Thursday morning for years, until the divorce complicated things. Carol lived near Gerald and Diane, and I think she felt caught in the middle. Carol, I said when she answered, I really need to see you. Can we meet for coffee? She hesitated. Sure. When? This Saturday? I'm driving to Lancaster to see Laura. I could stop in your town on the way. Okay. Let's meet at Harrison's Cafe at 10. That Saturday, I drove my rental car, $40 a day, money I could not afford, to Carol's town. I arrived at the cafe 15 minutes early, ordered coffee, and waited. Carol arrived right at 10, and then Laura walked in behind her. My chest tightened. You two coordinated this? They sat down across from me, their expressions serious, concerned. Megan, Laura began gently, we need to talk to you about something important. Okay, I said slowly. Carol leaned forward. We're worried about you. We think you might need help. I felt a chill run down my spine. What kind of help? Laura pulled out a piece of paper. I've been doing some research. There are some really good therapists in your area who specialize in helping people through difficult transitions. I don't need a therapist. I need people to believe me. They exchanged a look, and I knew immediately what had happened. Diane called you, didn't she? Laura nodded slowly. 2 weeks ago. She was really concerned about you, Megan. She told me you've been sending obsessive messages to Ashley, showing up at places unannounced, making threats. That's not true. I have a restraining order. I legally can't contact Ashley. Carol spoke up. Gerald called me too. He said you've been unstable since the divorce, that you've refused to get help, that this situation with Ashley has pushed you over the edge. They showed me things, Megan, Laura added. The social media posts. The recording of you at Ashley's apartment. It didn't sound good. That recording was edited. They took out everything Ashley said to provoke me. That's what Diane said you'd say, Carol said softly. Laura reached across the table to touch my hand. We love you. We're not judging you. But denying you have a problem is part of the problem. Blaming everyone else, seeing conspiracies, refusing to take responsibility. These are signs that you need professional help. I pulled my hand away, feeling betrayed. You think I'm crazy. We think you're struggling, and we want to help, Laura said. I looked at the list of therapists Laura had printed out, at the concern in their faces. They genuinely believed they were staging an intervention. They believed I was having a mental breakdown. Diane had poisoned them against me. She had been so reasonable, so concerned, so convincing, that even my own sister and my best friend of nearly 3 decades believed I was the problem. I stood up. I can't do this. Megan, please, Carol said. But I walked out of the cafe, got into my rental car, and drove away. That evening, I called my mother Eleanor in Florida. She was 72, a widow, living in a retirement community. I had not wanted to burden her with this mess, but I was desperate. I needed someone, anyone, to believe me. Mom, I said, and started crying. I told her everything. Eleanor listened quietly. When I finished, she sighed. Honey, Laura called me yesterday. My heart sank. What did she tell you? That she and Carol tried to talk to you today. That you walked out. She's worried you're having some kind of breakdown. Mom, I'm not. I swear. Diane and Gerald are lying. They're manipulating everyone. Laura said you'd say that too, Eleanor said gently. Sweetheart, maybe you should take some time off. Go somewhere quiet. Rest. Talk to someone professional who can give you perspective. Even my mother doubted me. I hung up shortly after, feeling more alone than I had ever felt in my life. I was completely isolated. My daughter was legally forbidden from me. My career was destroyed. My finances were under attack. And now my own family thought I was mentally unstable. Diane had systematically turned everyone against me. She had played the concerned, reasonable stepmom so perfectly that no one questioned her narrative. Meanwhile, I was the bitter, unstable ex-wife who could not let go. I sat in my apartment that night, the walls feeling like they were closing in. I had lost everything. My reputation, my relationships, my sense of self. And no one believed me. 6 weeks into this living nightmare, I officially lost my apartment. I could not make rent without a job. My severance money was nearly gone, drained by legal fees and living expenses. I had $3,400 left in my bank account. My second cousin Julia, a woman I barely knew, heard about my situation through the family grapevine. She offered me her spare room in a small town 60 miles away. I accepted because I had no other choice. I packed my life into boxes and rented a U-Haul for $89. Everything I owned fit into a 10-foot truck. I drove to Julia's house feeling like a failure. I was 48 years old, sleeping in my cousin's spare room like a teenager who had messed up her life. Julia was kind but distant. We had met maybe 5 times in our lives at family reunions. She was 55, divorced, worked at a dental office. She made it clear the arrangement was temporary, just until you get back on your feet. I spent my days applying for jobs and hearing nothing back. I spent my evenings staring at the ceiling of the spare room, trying to figure out how my life had fallen apart so completely. One afternoon, bored and desperate for distraction, I started going through boxes I had brought from storage, old photographs, childhood memorabilia, tax returns from years ago, divorce papers. I found a box labeled Divorce Papers, 2017. I had not looked at these documents in years. The divorce had been so painful that I had shoved everything into storage and tried to forget. But now, with nothing else to do, and a strange compulsion to understand how I had ended up here, I opened the box. Inside were all the financial disclosures, asset divisions, property settlements, loan documents. I spread them across the floor of Julia's spare room and started reading. Gerald and Diane had bought their house in January of 2018, 6 months after our divorce was finalized. I remembered Gerald claiming during the divorce that he could barely afford child support, but he and Diane had somehow come up with a down payment of $95,000 for a house that cost $475,000. Where had that money come from? I dug through the papers until I found the asset division from our divorce. Our marital home had sold for $320,000. After paying off the mortgage, the net proceeds were $170,000. This was supposed to be split evenly, $85,000 to each of us. I had received my $85,000. I used it for my apartment deposit and living expenses during the transition. Gerald should have received $85,000 too. But then, I found something that made me sit up straighter. There was a home equity loan on our marital home. The loan was for $50,000. It had been taken out 2 months before the divorce was filed. This loan was paid off from the house sale proceeds before the split, which reduced the amount each of us received. I stared at the document. The signature at the bottom looked like my signature, but I had never signed this. I never authorized a home equity loan. I never even knew about it. This was a forgery. Gerald had forged my signature to take out $50,000, then used the house sale to pay off the fraudulent loan. This meant the money available to split was reduced by $50,000. We each received $25,000 less than we should have. Gerald had stolen $25,000 from me through forgery, and he had used that stolen money, plus his legitimate share, to buy his house with Diane. But that still was not enough for a $95,000 down payment. I kept searching through the papers. Bank statements from our joint account in the months before the divorce. There it was, a transfer out of $10,000 1 week before the divorce was finalized. The memo line said property settlement, but I had never authorized it. The transfer went to Gerald's new individual account. Another theft. Another forgery. Gerald had stolen approximately $35,000 from me through fraud. I sat on the floor, surrounded by papers, and felt something crack inside me. Not despair. Anger. Cold, focused anger. This was mortgage fraud. This was forgery. These were federal crimes. I grabbed my phone and called Raymond, the private investigator Laura had once used to find her son when he ran away at age 16. I had his number saved from years ago. Raymond, this is Megan Cooper. I need your help. We met the next day at a diner. Raymond was 68, retired police detective, gray beard, sharp eyes. I showed him everything. He examined the documents carefully. This is fraud, he said flatly. Mortgage fraud is a federal offense. If you want to pursue this, you have grounds. I want to know everything about Diane first. Who she is, where she came from, what her history is. Raymond nodded. That'll cost you. $2,000 for a deep background check. I had $3,400 left to my name, but I paid him $2,000 in cash. 2 weeks later, Raymond called me. We need to meet. We sat in his car outside a grocery store parking lot. He handed me a folder. Diane has been married 5 times, he said. Gerald is husband number 5. I opened the folder. Inside were marriage certificates, divorce records, court documents. Diane married her first husband at age 23. Divorced at 25. Second marriage at 26, divorced at 30. Third marriage at 31, divorced at 36. Fourth marriage at 38, divorced at 42. Fifth marriage to Gerald at age 43. But what made my blood run cold was the pattern Raymond had highlighted. 3 of those marriages were to recently divorced men with daughters. In each case, the timeline was identical. Diane married the father within a year of his divorce from the mother. The biological mother slowly lost contact with the daughter. In 2 cases, the biological mothers eventually moved away and had no relationship with their daughters. In 1 case, there was a restraining order filed by the father against the mother. Raymond had found social media posts from years ago, pictures of Diane with the previous daughters, captions that said, "My real girls and biology doesn't make a mother." She has a pattern, Raymond said. She targets divorced men with daughters. She positions herself as the replacement mother. She systematically erases the biological mother. And then, once the daughter reaches her mid-20s and is financially independent, Diane leaves and moves on to the next family. I felt sick. This wasn't personal. This was what Diane did. What happened to the previous marriages? I asked. Raymond flipped through his notes. First 3 marriages ended amicably, no kids involved. 4th and 5th marriages, the ones with daughters, both ended after the daughters aged out. Diane filed for divorce in both cases once the girls were 24 and 26 respectively. She moved on quickly. Ashley is 22, I whispered. Exactly. You're looking at maybe 2 more years before Diane's interest fades. But by then, the damage is done. The relationship between mother and daughter is destroyed. I looked at the evidence in my hands. This was it. This was proof that Diane was manipulative, calculated, predatory. Can I show this to Ashley? Maybe if she sees this, she'll understand. Raymond looked doubtful but shrugged. Worth a try. But remember the restraining order. I contacted Ashley through a cousin who was still in touch with her. I sent the entire PI report. I waited 3 days, hoping, praying. Then Ashley called me. My heart leapt. She had seen the evidence. She understood. Did you get the report? I asked. I got it. Do you see now? Do you understand what Diane is? Ashley's voice was cold. I know Diane has been married before. She told me about her past. She's been honest with me. My hope crumbled. But Ashley, the pattern. Here's the thing, Mom. Diane has done more for me in 8 years than you did in my whole childhood. That's not fair. I sacrificed everything for you. Did you? Because I remember you working all the time. I remember living in a small apartment while Dad and Diane had a big house. I remember you being stressed and angry all the time. I was stressed because your father left us with nothing. Ashley cut me off. Diane pays for my art school, $35,000 a year. She bought me a car. She took me to Paris last year. She has connections in the art world that are helping my career. What did you ever give me? I gave you everything I had. It wasn't enough, Ashley said flatly. I don't need you anymore, Mom. I needed Diane, and she was there. You weren't. Don't contact me again. She hung up. I sat in Julia's spare room, staring at my phone, feeling something break inside me that I was not sure could ever be repaired. Ashley knew Diane was manipulative, but she had made a calculated choice. Money and opportunity over her biological mother. I called Raymond back. I need you to dig deeper. I need to know everything. What's Diane's real motive? Why does she do this? It cost me another $1,000. 1 week later, Raymond came back with information that changed everything. Gerald changed his will 3 months ago. His estate used to go directly to Ashley. Now it goes to Diane first. with Ashley receiving her share only if Diane approves. Diane controls everything. My stomach turned. What else? Raymond pulled out more documents. Your mother, Eleanor. She owns a home in Florida worth $600,000. She has investment accounts worth about $400,000. When she passes, that estate goes to you and Laura. What does that have to do with anything? Raymond looked at me seriously. If Ashley is positioned as Eleanor's beloved granddaughter, and you're out of the picture, Ashley could claim she deserves a larger share of the inheritance. Diane has been researching your family's assets. This isn't just about replacing you as Ashley's mother. This is about money. Long-term money. Diane is positioning herself to benefit financially from your family through Ashley. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. This entire 8-year scheme has been about money. Control Gerald's assets. Control Ashley. Erase me. Position herself to benefit from my family's wealth through Ashley when my mother eventually passes. Diane is not just a manipulator. She is a criminal. I sat in that room, surrounded by evidence of fraud, theft, and calculated manipulation, and I realized I was fighting something much bigger and darker than I had imagined. I had lost everything. My apartment was gone. My car was repossessed. My savings were down to $400. I was living in my cousin's spare room. My daughter hated me. My family thought I was crazy. I was legally prohibited from contacting Ashley. I was at absolute rock bottom. But I had evidence. I had proof. I had documentation of federal crimes. The question was, what could I do with it? 1 week later, I was officially homeless and broke. Julia, kind as she had been, told me she needed her spare room back. Her son was moving home after losing his job. I had 1 week to find somewhere else to go. I had $312 in my bank account. I had no car, no job, no prospects. I called a women's shelter and asked about availability. They had a bed open. I would be sleeping in a shelter at age 48. This was my reality. But something inside me refused to give up. I was not going to let Diane destroy me completely. I went back to my boxes one more time. Everything I owned was packed and stored in Julia's garage. I had 1 week to go through it all before I had to abandon most of it. I found another box from the divorce. Old financial statements, tax returns, property documents. I was looking for anything, any evidence, any leverage, and then I found it. Buried in a stack of papers was a copy of the closing documents from when Gerald and Diane bought their house. I had a copy because we had refinanced a joint property right before the divorce, and somehow these documents got mixed in with mine. The house cost $475,000. The down payment was $95,000. I had already figured out that Gerald used stolen money to make part of that down payment. But as I looked more carefully at the loan documents, something did not add up. The mortgage lender required proof of the down payment source. There was a letter in the file from Gerald's bank showing a balance of $110,000 in his account at the time of purchase. But according to the divorce settlement, Gerald should have had only $85,000 from the house sale. Even if he had saved money separately, he was claiming poverty during the divorce. He fought me over every dollar. He said he could barely afford child support. Where did he get $110,000? I looked at the dates more carefully. The money appeared in Gerald's account 2 weeks before the house purchase. It was a lump sum deposit of $110,000. I went back to my divorce papers. The asset division showed Gerald receiving $85,000 from the house sale. But the home equity loan fraud gave him an extra $25,000 that should have been mine. 85 plus 25 equals 110. The math worked, but it meant Gerald had committed mortgage fraud by using forged loan proceeds. But I kept digging. There was something else bothering me. I found the bank statements from our joint account in the final months before the divorce. I had looked at these before, but now I examined them line by line. There. A transfer of $10,000 out of the joint account 1 week before the divorce was finalized. It went to Gerald's individual account. I never authorized it. It was labeled property settlement, but there was no property settlement that required this transfer. Another theft. So Gerald had stolen $35,000 total. That still did not fully account for the down payment amount. I kept searching, and then I found something that made my heart stop. A document about Ashley's college fund, the 529 education savings account we had set up when she was born. We had contributed to it for years. By the time of the divorce, it had $68,000. The divorce decree stated the fund would remain intact for Ashley's education. Gerald was named custodian since he had primary custody. I had not thought about this account in years. I assumed the money was still there, being used for Ashley's education. I pulled out my laptop and logged into the account. I still had view access. The current balance was $412. $67,000 was missing. I clicked through the transaction history. 2 years ago, when Ashley was 20, Gerald had withdrawn the entire balance in 4 separate transactions. Ashley's college fund was gone. Gerald had stolen from his own daughter. And I remembered something Ashley had said during our last call. "You could never afford art school for me. Diane pays for it." Ashley thought I was poor. She thought I had not helped her financially. But the truth was, Gerald had stolen her college fund and blamed me for not contributing. That is why Ashley was so grateful to Diane. That is why she chose Diane over me. Gerald and Diane had stolen Ashley's education money and then made themselves her saviors by paying for art school. I sat on the floor of Julia's garage, surrounded by boxes and documents, and I realized I had evidence of multiple federal crimes. Mortgage fraud, forged signatures on the home equity loan, theft from the joint account, embezzlement from Ashley's college fund, and the recent false claim that I owed Gerald $12,000. Gerald and Diane had systematically defrauded me, stolen from Ashley, and committed crimes that carried serious prison time. I called Raymond immediately. "I found everything," I said, my voice shaking. "I have proof of all of it." Raymond came to Julia's house that evening. He reviewed every document. He made copies. He photographed evidence. "This is solid," he said finally. "This is mortgage fraud, which is federal. The forgeries, the theft, the embezzlement from the education account, these are all prosecutable crimes. If you want to press charges, you have a case." "What are we talking about? What kind of penalties?" "Mortgage fraud alone is 5 to 30 years in federal prison. Add in the other charges, Gerald is looking at serious time." I felt a surge of something I had not felt in 2 months. Power. "I have one contact at the FBI," Raymond said. "Former colleague. He handles mortgage fraud cases. If you want, I can reach out." "Do it," I said. 2 days later, I met with Thomas Brennan, an assistant federal prosecutor. He was 42, sharp suit, serious demeanor. He reviewed my evidence in a conference room while I sat across from him, barely breathing. "This is prosecutable," he said finally. "If you want to press charges, we can move forward. But you need to understand, this will be public. There will be a trial. Your daughter will know. Your family will know. Everyone will know." "I understand. And your daughter will likely be devastated. Her father could go to prison." "I know," I whispered. Brennan leaned back in his chair. And I'm not officially suggesting this, you could use this evidence as leverage. You could give them a choice. Make things right, or face prosecution. Sometimes that's more effective than a public trial. I looked at the folder of evidence on the table. I thought about Ashley. I thought about everything I had lost. I thought about everything they had taken from me. And I made a decision. "I want to give them a choice," I said. "But I want it done right. I want them scared. I want them to understand they can't manipulate their way out of federal charges." Brennan nodded. "I can draft a letter. It will come from my office, co-signed by your attorney. It will outline the evidence and give them 72 hours to respond. It will make clear that this is not a negotiation. They either make full restitution and admit the truth, or they face prosecution." "Do it," I said. For the first time in 2 months, I felt like I could breathe. The letter was drafted, reviewed, and sent via certified mail to Gerald and Diane. It was also sent to Gerald's attorney at Sterling and Hathaway. Copies were sent to Ashley's address. The letter outlined every crime in detail. It included copies of the forged documents, the bank statements, the college fund depletion records. It listed potential charges and prison sentences. It gave them 72 hours to agree to a meeting or face immediate prosecution. I waited. 60 hours later, Barbara called me. Gerald's attorney wants to meet. Tomorrow. They're panicking. Good, I said. The meeting was set for 10 in the morning at Barbara's office. Present would be me, Barbara, Gerald, his attorney, Diane, and Thomas Brennan, observing to ensure compliance. I barely slept that night. I put on my best outfit, a navy blue suit I had not worn since my last day at Hamilton Ridge High School. I styled my hair. I put on makeup. I looked in the mirror and saw someone I barely recognized. I looked strong. The next morning, I walked into Barbara's office with my head high. Gerald was pale, sweating, avoiding eye contact. Diane was cold, her jaw tight, clearly trying to maintain control. Gerald's attorney looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. We sat down. Brennan opened the meeting. You've seen the evidence. The choice is simple. Full restitution, signed confessions, and agreed upon terms, or I file federal charges this afternoon. You have 1 hour to decide. Gerald's attorney tried to negotiate. My client is willing to discuss partial restitution in exchange for... No negotiation, I interrupted, my voice calm and firm. Full restitution, public truth, or federal prosecution. 1 hour. The room was silent. And then, Gerald broke. This was all your idea, he suddenly shouted at Diane, his voice cracking. You told me to do it. You found the loophole. You practiced forging Megan's signature. You pushed me to drain Ashley's college fund. You said we could blame Megan and no one would ever know. Everyone froze. Gerald turned to me, desperate, tears in his eyes. I was weak. I went along with it. But Diane planned everything. She researched your family. She found out about your mother's money. She said, if we controlled Ashley, we could eventually get access to your family's estate. She's been planning this for 8 years. Diane's mask slipped. You idiot, she hissed at Gerald. Shut up. But Gerald kept talking, desperate to save himself. He confessed everything. The forged loan, the stolen money, the depleted college fund, the changed will, the fake claim that I owed him $12,000, the insurance fraud, and he revealed the depth of Diane's plan. She had specifically targeted him after researching his divorce in public records. She knew about Eleanor's assets. She saw Ashley as a long-term financial investment. She never loved Ashley. Ashley was a means to an end. I listened to Gerald's confession with cold satisfaction, and then the door opened. Ashley walked in. I gasped. Raymond had called her, told her there was an urgent meeting about her father. He had not told her what it was about. She had come thinking it was a family emergency. She had heard everything. You stole my college fund? She said to Gerald, her face white. Her voice was shaking. Gerald went silent, staring at his daughter. Ashley turned to Diane. You never loved me? Diane tried to recover. Sweetie, this is all out of context. I heard you, Ashley said, tears spilling down her cheeks. I heard everything. You told him I was an investment. You researched my grandmother's money. You planned this for 8 years. She looked at me. Really looked at me. For the first time in months. Mom, she whispered. I did not move. I did not speak. I just looked at her. I'm so sorry, Ashley said, and collapsed into a chair, sobbing. The meeting continued. With Ashley present and Gerald's confession recorded, there was no more negotiating. Gerald agreed to everything. Return all stolen money, $115,000 with interest. Sign a sworn affidavit admitting to the crimes. Change his will back to leave everything directly to Ashley. Cover all my legal fees. Sign documents stating the $12,000 claim was fraudulent. Diane was forced to sign a statement, admitting her role in the manipulation. She would move out of Gerald's house within 30 days. She would be prohibited from ever contacting Ashley again. In exchange, I would not pursue federal charges, but the evidence would be held in escrow. Any violation of the agreement would result in immediate prosecution. Thomas Brennan oversaw the signing of all documents. It was done. 2 weeks after the meeting, I received a bank transfer. $115,000 appeared in my account. My savings, which had been down to $312, was suddenly restored and then some. The fraudulent debt claim was officially withdrawn. The restraining order was vacated at my request. Hamilton Ridge High School contacted me. The school board wanted to meet. I sat across from Principal Thompson and 3 board members. They had reviewed new evidence showing I had been the victim of a systematic harassment and fraud campaign. They apologized. They offered me my job back with a promotion to senior guidance counselor and a salary increase of $8,000 per year. I accepted. My reputation was restored. The social media posts were deleted after Barbara sent legal demands. People who had gossiped about me suddenly wanted to apologize. I moved back into an apartment, a nicer one this time, in a quiet neighborhood with a small balcony. I bought a used car, a reliable sedan that I paid for in cash. I set up a savings account and started rebuilding my emergency fund. But the most important restoration was with my family. I sent copies of all the evidence to Laura and Carol. Laura called me crying. "I'm so sorry. I should have believed you. I let Diane manipulate me. Can you ever forgive me?" Carol drove 2 hours to see me in person. She hugged me and sobbed. "I was a terrible friend. I abandoned you when you needed me most. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you." Eleanor called from Florida. "I'm coming to visit. I need to see you, to hug you, to tell you how proud I am of you." These relationships would take time to fully heal. Trust had been broken, but there was acknowledgement, genuine remorse, and a commitment to rebuild. And then there was Ashley. 3 weeks after the confrontation, Ashley sent me a text. "Can we talk?" We met at a coffee shop, neutral territory. Ashley looked thin, tired, older than her 22 years. She had moved out of Gerald's house and gotten her own apartment. We sat across from each other, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, Ashley said, "I chose money over you. I knew something was wrong with Diane, but I liked what she could give me. The trips, the art school tuition, the connections. I convinced myself that you were the problem because it was easier than admitting I was being bought." I listened. "I'm ashamed," Ashley continued, her voice breaking. "I said horrible things to you. I humiliated you on social media. I recorded you and gave it to them to use against you. I let them destroy you, and I did nothing. I don't know if you can ever forgive me." I reached across the table and took her hand. "You were manipulated, but you're also responsible for your choices. We both have to live with what happened. Do you think we can try again?" Ashley asked. "I want to know who you really are. I want to understand what I missed all these years." I nodded. "We can try, but it has to be real. No pretending, no forcing it, just honest conversations and time." Over the following months, Ashley and I met weekly for coffee. Sometimes the conversations were easy, filled with laughter, as I shared stories from her childhood she had forgotten. Sometimes they were painful, as we confronted the ways we had both failed each other. Ashley started therapy to work through her guilt and her complicated feelings about Gerald and Diane. Gerald had been devastated by his own confession and was trying to rebuild some kind of relationship with Ashley, but it was strained. Diane disappeared. She moved out of town, and we heard through mutual connections that she was seen dating a recently divorced man in another state. Her pattern continued. Ashley used some of the returned college fund money to pay me back for things she never knew I had sacrificed for. She learned about the nights I worked double shifts so she could attend summer camp, the times I skipped meals so she could have new school clothes, the way I had lived small so she could have opportunities. She began to see her childhood differently, remembering not the struggle but the love behind it. 6 months after the confrontation, it was Thanksgiving. I hosted a small dinner at my apartment. Ashley came, as did Laura and her family, Carol and Eleanor, who flew in from Florida. As we gathered around my modest table, Ashley handed me a wrapped package. I opened it carefully. Inside was a framed photograph, recently taken, of Ashley and me together. We were both smiling, genuine smiles. Below the photo, Ashley had written in careful handwriting, "My mom, my real mom, always was, always will be." I cried when I saw it. "I'm sorry it took me so long to see it," Ashley whispered, and we embraced. It was the first, truly genuine hug we had shared in years. Looking around at my family, reassembled and healing, I thought about the Mother's Day photo 8 months earlier. The moment Ashley replaced me with Diane, the moment everyone waited for me to break. I had left that room feeling like a ghost, but I had not stayed a ghost. I had fought back, not with screaming or begging, but with patience, strategy, and truth. I had waited for the right moment. I had gathered evidence. I had struck when I had the leverage to win. I thought about everything I had learned through this ordeal. That sometimes the people who love you will hurt you, not because they're evil, but because they're human and flawed. That dignity is not about never falling apart, but about how you put yourself back together. That the truth has its own timeline, and patience is a weapon when wielded with courage. That fighting back does not always mean fighting loud. Sometimes it means fighting smart. And I learned that being a mother means loving your child, even when they choose someone else, even when they hurt you, even when you have every right to walk away. It means protecting them even while you fight for yourself. Ashley looked at me across the table and smiled, and I saw my daughter again, really saw her, for the first time in years. We still had work to do. Our relationship was not magically healed. There were conversations still to be had, trust still to rebuild, wounds still to mend. But we had time now. We had truth. We had a beginning. As dinner wound down and everyone shared what they were thankful for, I realized I was thankful for the hardest fight of my life, because it taught me who I was at my core. It showed me I was stronger than I ever knew. It proved that truth and patience could triumph over manipulation and lies. Sometimes the greatest strength is knowing when to wait, when to strike, and when to forgive. I did all three, and I got my daughter back. I looked at Ashley, who was laughing at something Laura said, and I thought, this is what victory looks like. Not revenge, not destruction, but restoration, truth, healing, family. I had walked out of that Mother's Day photo as a ghost. I walked into this Thanksgiving as a mother, a survivor, and a fighter. And that made all the difference. Have you ever had to fight for a relationship that everyone told you to give up on? Have you experienced being doubted by the people closest to you, only to be proven right in the end? Share your story in the comments. Your experience might help someone else who's going through something similar. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you that patience and truth can overcome even the darkest manipulation, please take a moment to like this video. It helps more people find these stories when they need them most. And if you want to hear more stories about resilience, justice, and the strength it takes to rebuild when everything falls apart, subscribe to this channel. Every week, we share real stories about real people fighting real battles and coming out stronger on the other side. Finally, share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Maybe they're in the middle of their own fight. Maybe they feel like giving up. Maybe they just need to know that sometimes, if you're patient and strategic and brave, the truth does win. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being part of this community. And remember, you're stronger than you think, braver than you believe, and more resilient than you ever imagined. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.